From the realms of Middle-earth to the shores of the Undying Lands and those clouds over Mordor in between, I'm Ken Napzok, running in fast and hard into this show. Oh, we'll talk about my life, your life, everyone's life. We are here live on Casterly Talk, here on our YouTube channel, later on our podcast feed to talk about Rings of Power. Look back at season 1, kind of recap it, talk about what we loved, maybe what we liked. There's a difference. Talk about things. Hey, we love playing around with some what ifs or some questions, and also some theories and thoughts towards season 2. You absolutely know I'm not going to do that by myself. That'd be boring. So we have a full panel here today. That is right. Returning to the show is the wonderful Nicky Kumar. I think this is the first time we're really on air other than that other live show. So you did a great breakdown, Nicky. Rachel Cushing Levine is here. And that guy, Alden Diaz. I guess he's here too. Hi, Alden.
I just don't leave. That's what it is. I just burrow like a hobbit into the StreamYard and just live here.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Here we have. I always like to be honest in my broadcasting. I've had a back problem for a long time, but I appointment that was going to take 15 minutes took 45, and I just landed here on the Undying Lands, the shores of the Undying Lands.
Well, that'll happen when you're carrying so many shows and amazing projects. Yeah.
No, I'm along for the ride on all the shows I got here. It's been a lot of fun. I'll start this way before I dive in. Been a lot of fun covering Rings of Power, this Lord of the Rings television program. A lot of pressure on it. $750 million budget for the entire run of the show. That was much covered. The Tolkien Estate, what they can and cannot say. That'll come up at some point here tonight. I wasn't sure here as the voice behind Casterly Talk for the last couple of years. I wasn't sure if I was going to cover it. Someone had suggested it to me. A friend of mine, good pal Joe Starr, said you should just cover a lot more of the other shows you like. I don't like to watch fantasy as much as other people. I don't watch The Witcher. I don't watch Wheel of Time. All great shows. Not here to talk bad about it. I just don't watch them. But I knew I was going to watch Rings of Power. But can we take Casterly Talk into Middle Earth? And we ended up, I think, not only succeeding and having fun, bringing our brand of discussions. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk more Lord of the Rings around these parts as we look at the movies. Maybe even, who knows, some kind of book club. I'll make Alden read the books aloud here on YouTube. So I'll start there. A lot of that, Rachel, you've been here with me off and on the show for a few years. Your excellent insights and coverage of Game of Thrones, the world of Game of Thrones, were heard on this channel and other channels as well. So it was key to have you back. My life had gotten hectic schedule-wise, and I'm glad it all worked out. We can't talk Rings of Power without you.
I can't tell you how much I look forward to doing this every week with you guys, just to have people who feel similarly about the show the way that I do, and feel that there are certain great ways to talk about it. And Ken has always talked about, like, he's not just about recaps or top 10 lists and whatnot. The idea is to really talk through it, talk about the characters, what hit, what didn't for us, what works in terms of bigger picture and themes. And just, this is the kind of conversation I would sit around and have with my family, because we loved Tolkien so much growing up and reading the books. And we went to see the movies in the theaters the first time. We would have this roundtable afterwards and just discuss everything and talk about shots and talk about characters and all of that. So this is definitely the channel to do that on. So I'm very honored to have been a part of this one.
Yeah, and I love that. And on that style, it's interesting in this digital media age that's been going strong now, well over 10 years. And I've been part of the punditry space for a while now. In fact, I remember when Alden Diaz used to send me postcards to sign for autographs for money and send a self-addressed stamp envelope along with it. Now he's here on the show with me. Now, yeah, I have a certain way of approaching it. It is a way greatly influenced by what we do over at Force Center with Joseph Grimshaw and Jennifer Landa, which doesn't mean we absolutely adore everything about every one of these shows. We are here to celebrate these franchises because we love them. We're here to try to engage with what is presented. And occasionally you do run up to things, that wasn't my favorite episode. That wasn't my favorite moment. It's not about pushing past that and ignoring it. It is finding out what is here for you, because otherwise, pack up your bags and leave. I don't want to sit around and talk about a world or a show that I don't like anymore, which does happen. So, this year was a lot of fun to do that with you, Alden, to not only as we still discuss House of Dragon, but Rings of Power as well. We'll start diving in here. But Alden, I'll pitch it to you on your thoughts on how we discuss it.
Yeah, it's I think in harsher off-air terms the other day I said to you something along the lines of that this for me is like a therapeutic like act of rebellion because everything does get sort of distilled down into, like Rachel was saying, top tens, recaps, ink is spent, dollars are distributed, and then half of the article is telling you what you saw, or it's a dunk on something else, or it's just really really bad faith. We have to destroy something to raise something else up, which has been a big problem in a lot of fantasy worlds lately. We'll just leave it at that. And it is refreshing to come to the table and say, I like this. Oh, why? Oh, I didn't really work for me. Well, why? Because that's where I sort of came up loving this stuff, and whether that was as a kid carrying around my Marvel encyclopedias or DK books, or then in middle school and high school and doing dialectical journals and Socratic seminars, and then you get to adulthood and suddenly you're working in a Trader Joe's and no one really cares or wants to talk about it. Or maybe that was just my experience. Maybe the Trader Joe's is a little too specific. But having this, and like you said, you joked, God, don't send me back to that place. But I it's true. Like I had moments recently that were sort of surreal. Like, no, the Ken Napzok autographs that I have are not moving, unfortunately, on the eBay flip. But I do.
No one wants them.
No, actually, unfortunately, not. We might have to just auction them off to the highest comments. But I remember, like, I knew you from Force Center, and then listening to Casterly Talk and hearing you and Rachel and Lon and Andres and everybody else that would pop in and thinking, oh, they're not just saying like how cool it was that John did that with his sword. They're asking, what was John thinking? How was he feeling? What does that mean? What is this performer doing? And I started calling in, and then you call it enough times, and then suddenly the guy's at the chiropractor and he needs you to jump in, and it's just funny how that works out. Yeah. But it's been great. It's easy to make fun of you, Ken, sometimes when you say like, I don't really like fantasy, and then it's like, except for Star Wars and Westeros and Middle Earth, Willow. It's like, it starts to add up a little bit, but I think this was a really invigorating shot to balance out the darkness of the other show that we covered.
Yeah. No, I appreciate. No, I get what you're saying there. Yeah, and from there, Alden says, "Hey, this is this cat Nicky. You might have known from the Imperial Setup podcast. I think I ate macaroni and cheese in front of Nicky at Star Wars Celebration.
It was mashed potatoes.
Mashed potatoes. But you're here, Nicky. We'll start with you here as we dive into the show, and there's some big things to talk about, big things to look back. There's actually, I'll just let Rachel know now. I'm going to come to you, Rachel, for some Tolkien lore talk a little bit later, and what your thoughts are going in and coming out of the show. I just want to let you know there, since I didn't submit any formats for you all because I was busy. Nicky, your relationship to the show going in, your expectations. Let's start there as we dive into Rings of Power.
Yeah, I think as far as expectations, it was one of those things where I didn't really know if I had any, because I remember having conversations as we were getting into the buildup of, it's like, oh, are you more excited for House of the Dragon or Rings of Power? And I was like, I kind of want to say House of the Dragon just because I feel like I understand where it's gonna come in at. Like, it's only been 3 years since Thrones. It's, Miguel Sapochnik tied in deeply with Thrones. I felt like I knew where that was gonna come in, and then Rings of Power was like, if it was Peter Jackson, I'd feel like I'd know better where we were gonna start, or like how it was gonna feel. But because it's not, I was like, I just don't know I don't know what to think yet. and then as trailers started coming out and they were very vibrant and beautiful and exciting, then I sort of started feeling more comfortable about, what is this what kind of viewing experience is this gonna be like? So yeah, I mean, that was kind of the expectation. It sort of grew as we got closer, and then by the time it was, time to hit play, I was very ready.
Very ready. Yeah, no, I had a lot of questions coming in too. I love this world, but I don't love it as much as Star Wars, meaning I don't spend as much time in it. The Jackson movies, particularly Lord of the Rings, are those things that I need in my life for inspiration, even though I haven't lived with the books. The books have been around since well before. I know I look older, but the books have been around well before I've been alive. I just had a different relationship with them. So I understand what you're saying, where I had almost no expectations. It was kind of, all right, let's see. F it. Let's see what they're doing. Let's see what Bezos is doing from his space rocket, and let's see what we can put together. And from that point, I think I've been pleasantly surprised. Alden, and then I'll get to Rachel here. But Alden, going into the show this season, and even the build-up, because this has been a long time coming. What were your thoughts and expectations?
It's an interesting point about the buildup because we are all either like working in the industry, very plugged into the industry. I remember being on morning radio and we would do entertainment news, and sometimes this would come up and they would defer to me just like as the resident geek kid. And so what is it going to be about? And some rock DJ like was Frodo's dad, like what is this? And I would have to be like, well, I don't know, like I literally don't know. And you would hear the reports of, is this going to be Strider, or sort of like the early adventures? Is this going to be the Silmarillion? Oh, they can't do the Silmarillion. Oh, so we don't know. And it was just this constant back and forth of, like you were saying, Nikki, I don't know how to be excited for a thing that I know nothing about. If they had said Strider coming to Amazon, it's like, okay, I know it's very personal. I know it's one guy. I know it's this, and you can start to expound upon it, like how in the Westeros side of things, we know they're doing Dunk and Egg. So immediately I know, okay, that's probably going to be the smallest and most intimate of these thus far. This was just Amazon has Lord of the Rings, period. They are doing it for a lot of cash, period. And that's not a lot to work on. But finally, when we got details, I started to feel like, okay, this looks gorgeous. It looks very intricate. It looks very warm. Warm was a word that kept coming to me the entire buildup of these sort of like these tones and the way that like the early looks, like some of the first images we saw were Linden, and like that wide shot of Elrond greeting Galadriel was one of the first ones. And I was like, that makes me feel this larger than life sort of feeling that I've been missing. And I need something optimistic. Even She-Hulk, for as jokey as it was, ends on a really dark, timely note about shaming and about gender and about abuse. And that's, I need those conversations. We all do. Yeah. But I needed some sort of bastion of good. And as the trailer started to land, I think it was the Comic-Con trailer, maybe the one right before, where I thought to myself, okay, all right, we're still getting a little bit of a taste, and I'm really into it.
That one with the Wandering Day song going over it, that felt like really on point.
Well, love it. All great stuff. And now, Rachel, I turn to you. This is the most interesting insight into this because, as you said before, this is truly. I know you love Star Wars. You love it with all of your heart as well. You love other things. You and I have talked about Westeros for hours now on programs. But let's be honest. This world, Tolkien's world, is probably your number one world, right? Other than maybe occasionally rooting for the Patriots or Red Sox, maybe.
Sure, we'll keep sports over there for now. I've told this story before. My parents were huge Tolkien fans when the books first came out. They were teenagers and they just fell in love with it. They fell in love with the culture that was around it, the Frodo Lives stickers, and they used to play Dungeons and Dragons, and all their characters were named after Lord of the Rings characters. And so my sister and I are 5 years old, and we already know the bones of the story because they would tell it to us and then they would read it to us. And we had the Hobbit cartoon and the Ralph Bakshi, and it's just always been a thing that brings my family together because we all love it. And that's hard to do sometimes, it's to get four people, to get us, all four of us to agree on watching a movie is always tough. But if it's Lord of the Rings, we're all in. Like it's, so it's always been integral in terms of my family for me. And then on top of that, I showed at an early age that fantasy was my genre. It was the idea of other worlds, other planets, other beings that your imagination could run wild with. And there's all kinds of fantasy. And I know we inevitably always come back to the Martin of it all and the Tolkien of it all and everything else. They're both fantasy, but they're entirely different kinds of fantasy, both 100% valid. Some will speak to one person differently, others, whatever. But like just in general, that world, the world building, the characters, to some sense of magic, some sense of wonder, good versus evil, all of that has always been just something that I just love. I mean, straight up love.
So, from those beginnings, and even those who rooted for you in the Shmoda, not only you were an excellent competitor in the Inner Geekdom, but your famous Galadriel entrance and everything this is known, and that's there's going to be a special set of expectations you had coming in, and jumping slightly ahead in the conversation, you've been honest along the way of things that that butts up against something I know of the world, or I have a question about that. You've been honest from the start about this show, but going into this show, what were you feeling? Even like 2 years out, a year out, a week out, what were you feeling?
When Amazon bought the rights, and they figured, or they were in the middle of figuring out stuff with the Tolkien Estate, the early rumors were Aragorn and Gandalf. And I went on record to every person, everything I could find, and go, nope, I don't want the young Aragorn Chronicles. I feel like we have lived in Middle Earth in that period of time between Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit enough. And as a Tolkien fan, knowing that he'd written thousands and thousands and thousands of years worth of history with other characters that deserve, just as much attention to be paid. And to me, initially, I was like, if you're going down that road, I'm out. I'm whatever. You're not going to bring anything to this that we haven't already gotten. And I would be disappointed because you had all this other stuff. Now, Tolkien Estate aside, we all know that has been a crutch, an obstacle, and they've had to even work their way around that. But once the rumors started, and they released the map of Numenor, so then the Tolkien nerd in me, lore master, I knew Second Age, and that's when I started to get more excited. Because I know all the beats, I know the characters, and a lot of them are ones that I was really, really excited to see again, but see earlier versions of them. All of that started to amp up my hopes for it. But still, there was, with every image, with every trailer, with every article, there always was the caveat of they aren't allowed to do certain things. And as the lover of the words, it was a little weird, hard for me to, wonder how true they can be or will be. I've never been necessarily word for word, literally word for word. But you have to get the tone right. You have to get the feel right. You have to get the themes right for me in adaptations. And that's what I was looking for, and eventually did find in the show.
Love that. Great way to start. We're going to dive in here. Along the way, if you all out there watching live have questions, we will absolutely try to get to them here. Our buddy Haskell's got some good ones here. So I'll come to those here in a second, Eddie. It's good to see you out in New York recently, too. So we appreciate that. Super chats are not needed, but always appreciated. Help keep the show live, but we'll try to get all the questions we can in. Let's start big, friends. Let's start big. Nicky, I'm going to put you on the spot. In the time we have here tonight, because we can't go on forever and ever, I want to talk big moments, favorite episodes, characters, reveals, lines, all those kind of things. Alden, you said we're not doing top 10 lists, but Nicky, give me right now top 10 favorite moments. I'm kidding. We'll start with you. We'll just go around Robin here, jump in. Let's talk. Nicky, what jumps out to you first?
I think something that really stuck out to me was the tension building of the sort of Southlands battle in the Ugun episode. If there were parts of that felt very long nighty for me, and it was almost like specifically the part where they're all in the village and it's dark, and then one light, and then it's like, oh, they're coming, and then it's lots of lights, and then it's like, oh my gosh. So it was like, yeah, those things were really cool in that episode. I think just the execution of the battle was really fun. I love right now I listen to the first 40 seconds of I think the track on the soundtrack is Cavalry. And it's the part where the Numenorian cavalry is coming in. That's so like, that just gives my day like twice as much energy as I could possibly need. So there's stuff like that. Those moments I think really stick out to me. The ending of that episode with Oradruin blowing was that felt like a huge moment for the show, and kind of one of those like Ned Stark loses his head, like the pop culture, like zoomed in on it, and they were like, oh, this was big. So that was I don't want to like name all the moments. I'll stay with that. And that was a big one.
You know, it's real fun. Obviously, it's going to be fun anyway, but when you rewatch, you will see Ardruin in the background of so many shots. From the get, that mountain is always looming in the background, and it's fun when you know where it ends, and then you go back and you start rewatching, you start picking up on all the little things, and that was one of the things.
Right?
Wow, it's just constantly up there.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Oh, go ahead.
I remember when Bronwyn said it like in passing in episode 3, and I sat up. I was like, what? I just was not expecting to hear that in that moment. So that was it was super cool.
But it's a great point about the culture of it too, like that you said that the whole pop culture sphere sort of turned and looked, even if they weren't watching. I haven't gotten this many questions from people that are either watching very casually, they tune in, they tune out, and they like it, or people that weren't watching at all, probably since Grogu debuted. Is that, I think I got at least 4 DMs or texts, like, was that Mount Doom? Like, the very same? And I was oh yeah. Like, you just watched it. Very iconic, instantly iconic.
I don't know if any of us hang out at water coolers anymore at the office. I don't know if that's a thing, but it was one of those
What's
moments.
an office?
and correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel. Didn't I see you tweet out that you like just did a rewatch, like jammed them all in one day or something? Did I see that?
Pretty much, yeah. Last night I had already watched episodes 1 and 2, and then last night I powered through 7. And then I rewatched 8 this morning. But yeah, once I sort of got into it, I was just like, Sam was coming downstairs, like, isn't it bedtime? I'm like, I can't stop. Like, when they just roll into each other, especially the middle episodes, they kind of hit a little differently when you're watching them back to back, because sometimes you're not with certain storylines, so you don't feel so far removed from them. And then the progression, quite frankly, worked better for me.
Yeah,
I saw some of the things that I was missing, or some of the things I thought was repetitive, still are to an extent, but there was still a build and a rhythm to it that I really, really liked.
That's a great discussion point there too. I had lunch with a friend today, and this is one of the pals that we would celebrate Lord of the Rings all the time, and we worked at our old job together, and sometimes we ride into action pretending we're on horses with Aragorn and King Theoden, and that's how much we love this stuff here. These nerds, like, and I said, hey, you watching it? And he goes, yeah, I am. I watched the first 3, and I've kind of stopped, and life's kind of busy. I don't know, it was kind of slow, which was a general, not incorrect statement, but it's just one of the things we heard. And then I was like, just hold on, because I think it's gonna hit. But going back, Rachel, that's not that. Like I said, that's not an incorrect thing. It was a slow burn. We heard that a lot. We're hearing that about Andor here. But it was a slow fantasy burn. Does some of that stuff? Am I hearing you right? Some of it's playing a little differently now that you're watching it back to back, and the whole story from season 1's in place. Yeah,
it felt like. It's not seamless, but like it didn't feel quite as jarring. And, it's easier for me, but I've often, heard from people that are sort of a little afraid of fantasy. One of the reasons is because everything's made up. Names, the characters, the places, all of that stuff. So when you watch something weekly, it's easy to forget. And when you come back, heck, this isn't even just about fantasy. Like, I did it for The Wire, and I was like, remind me whose crew that guy's on. Like, it took me a little while to really get that. And when we were binging The Wire, so that's how it got easier for me, because we were watching the episodes back to back. I think just generally speaking, that's how it goes. And I know there's all kinds of arguments about binging versus the wait and the anticipation and everything else, and both have their place. But just in general, as rewatching in general, you have new perspective. So you're watching it in a new way, but then also binging it really helped keep things more balanced than I had initially thought they were.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a great point, and I haven't had a chance to go back yet. And I see Big Lou in chat check it in, says I can't wait to do a full rewatch. Yeah, it's always rewarding. And look, I both work. I think it's better for business to do these shows weekly. It's better for the conversation. It's better for the engagement, which are metrics that we shows and networks have to worry about, but also it doesn't mean you're not going to go back and binge the hell out of them later on and have them work in a different way. We can have cake and cake is what I'm saying.
Big Lou, I used to do that. Big Lou just wrote, I make naming list spreadsheets for just about every show I watch. I used to do that for fantasy novels. And I would handwrite. I would just have like a thick piece of paper. And because there's like, David Eddings, the Belgariad, and there's all the countries, and there's all the kings and queens of each country. And so I was just writing them all down as I came across them, so that when I came back to them later, I would be able to have my little cheat sheet to remind myself of that. So
I love that. I did that at Star Wars Celebration. I was like, Alden, which is that one, Nicky? Which one? Is that Nicky?
That bar gets very crowded very quick.
The Marriott.
Yeah, the Marriott. Yeah,
Alden, I know you got a lot of big moments, things that really touched you. But when you think back, the season has ended. What jumps out of some of your favorite moments?
Don't steal mine.
I think it might be safe because it's not something. It's not one thing. It's a pattern. The parents and children, like it's no secret for anyone that's ever listened to anything I've done. 90% of my relationship with the things I watch is me unpacking my own shit through characters. That's why I love Return of the Jedi, and then everything else just sprinkles out from there. That's why I was a sucker immediately for The Mandalorian. That's why I was a sucker for Jon Snow, because I too wear all black and don't know one of my parents and I'm from the North. Like there's a lot of that coming through, and the way that it happened with the Durans, with Largo and Marigold and Nori, the way that happened with Isildur and Elendil, even the lingering specter of Galadriel's family, even though Finrod's only in the beginning and then in that Sauron vision, and it's in all the stories. It's there with Arondir and Bronwyn and Theo, and that was something that I think I missed. Not that other stuff wasn't doing it, because again, Star Wars probably has at least right now, the flag planted and it's about family. I mean, they got that Carrie Fisher quote and they built entire campaigns and spots around it, as they should have. But I think, we were talking about the time when there wasn't any new Tolkien coming out on screen anyway. Online was still going and the games were still coming out here and there. But after Battle of Five Armies, it sort of had a Revenge of the Sith type feel, like, oh, I guess we're done forever. And similarly, when we got Unexpected Journey, it was like, we're back. Like we had the trilogy, then we had another trilogy, but then that second trilogy was like, okay, but for real this time, it's over. And I think I had sort of accepted that, and some of that warmth was gone, some of that wholesomeness was gone, and it's a very specific thing. It's like we said goodbye to Thorin, spoilers for The Hobbit, I guess. And then when Bilbo goes home at the end of that, it was like, well, book closed. Yeah. And then this was, never mind, there's all these other families to connect to. There's all these other groups to connect to. And yes, it's not Peter Jackson. And it's not the same universe. It's not the same take. It can still spiritually set us up. Like, how many episodes of Casterly did we talk about Kate Blanchett and what she did, and how that connects, even though they're not the same Galadriel and they don't need to be. It's in that language. So I was just, the entire time I was a sucker for that, especially in, I think, episode 7. That's where you get the blowout of Durin the Third and Durin the Fourth and Namarie and everything that happens there. And then probably that aside specific scene, just the Nori leaving with Gandalf question mark was the best thing. I've watched that a bunch of times. Shout out to our friend Jerry from the Bombad cast, whose daughter's name is Eleanor, and was watching that scene. He's like, I started crying and heard my daughter's name's Eleanor. She's Eleanor, and it's just fantastic.
We can shout out Jarek. We can't shout out Scotty.
No, he's on too many wanted lists.
Too many. That's great. Rachel, before, I'm not going to steal one of your moments, Rachel. One of the things that just to slip in myself here, my thoughts is, I love discussing themes. Working with Joseph Scrimshaw for years, I now see everything in terms of themes because he's a professor of themes. And so to apply that here, I was expecting a story of light and dark, because that is very much this world. And you talked about earlier, Alden, optimistic. It is a warmth. There's a warmth to this world. I was expecting that, and I was excited for that, and I got it. But the way, right from the opening scene, which I have rewatched that first episode, the way this show comes on out, and this is why I have really enjoyed watching Rings and Realm, and shout out to Corey over there. I really love their channel. because it's deep on the themes and it's Tolkien professors talking about things. But this play, I just was moved by this show that is like there's light and dark, and sometimes it's hard to tell the difference, and that carried out in every episode, in every scene, in every moment, and how that spills on out into our own lives. I don't believe that these shows, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, that kind of stuff. Game of Thrones is a different world. Rachel, you said it earlier. It's a different world. It hits differently. But Lord of the Rings, Star Wars are worlds that talk about light and dark, and light versus dark, and hope in the darkness. But to dive into it, I don't believe in gray areas. I believe there are gray periods in your life, but you either choose or you don't, and you get there or you don't, or you choose to not go one direction, you choose to go towards the dark or the light. And that's so important. And this show just spent so much time in it, including my good buddy Halbrand, who's just a good dude.
Remember Halbrand?
Halbrand, he's just this guy, but to have that play on out where even they're taking a little bit of a Tolkien letter, right? More than anything about Sauron. And explaining that, and just go, I loved living in that every week to week of, what's difficult? Deciding who is actually good and who is actually bad. That's what our world's about. And I was moved every week from that.
Yeah. And playing along with that, I always think that shows that have characters who have different perspectives on themes like that, that's why the light and dark theme worked, is because in order to tell where the light is, you have to touch the dark. That feels like a truth, and that's brought up multiple times. And the idea of to recognize or to understand, you have to see it from that side. And then you have characters who expressly, like Sauron is evil, and I'm not even, no quotes, he's evil, but he has a perspective, he has a reason, he has a justification, he has, I'm healing Middle Earth, he's just got a mantra or whatever, his outlook on things. And then you have somebody like Nori, who's almost on the pure good side. Right. And then everybody in the middle, like you said, not so much gray areas, but complicated areas. And using that to explore light and dark, shadow, and reflections, and all of that is so much a part of this entire series, and it's just so well done in that way.
It shines through every week for me. And it's the thing where I will go on a rant that there's no such thing as a great Jedi. There might be questions, there might be complicated areas, but you either choose or you don't. And this just every week, you mentioned the Nori stuff was heart-wrenching at times, inspiring at others. I did not ugly cry as much as Alden, because it's hard to when you hear how hard he sobs at that final scene, but it got Lou there. Great stuff there. But Rachel, I don't need just one moment, but what jumps out when you look back, when you're doing a rewatch and Sam's like, I'm going to bed because the Cubs are out of season. What jumps out?
Elrond and Durin. It just, like I said, I did the whole rewatch. I think one of my absolute favorite scenes is when they are sitting in the cave, letting the rocks settle, where Durin's already made the decision to go against his father and to try to help Elrond. And they're down there, and the way that they talk, and it swings from funny, Elrond tipping his hand that he gave up on the contest, to them, you're very dwarvish for an elf, and I always thought you were pretty elvish dwarf. And he's son of Durin, grandson of Durin, and then you get to the secret name, and the way the look on his face as he's going to tell him this is his brother, that has been clearly established, and he's going to say it, and Elrond is the one to say no. That's something he believes in, the brotherhood too, but don't say that now. That is something that we can save because we're still moving forward. At that point, they thought they were. Just the way this show handled dwarves was spectacular, because what it did is it built on Gimli and the dwarves in the Hobbit movies, who by and large are pretty two-dimensional. They're brave, they're stalwart, they're fighters, like all of that's true, but it was hard to really get to know any of them outside of really Thorin. And he's just driven by rage and vengeance pretty much the most of the time. Here you see brave and stalwart and crafty, but then you see what's behind that. And that is a huge heart and love of family and love of creation. And I love that it's not even just about stone. Like the first time you see Khazad-dûm and you see the waterfalls and the greenery and the fact that Durin has the seedling and he has babied that thing and taken care of that thing for 20 years. And that's a seedling of the tree that is starting to rot in Lindon, but it's not rotting down there. Like it just, they made me like dwarves. I've never really liked dwarves. Like, fine.
You're just like, let me say it plain.
Yeah,
they were ranked last.
And they like dwarves. And Disa fracking rules. And Elrond and Durin, their relationship is just such a heart. It's like the heart of the show for me. And those two actors and the way that it develops and the way they communicate and the looks. Just the heartbreaking, the Namarie, like all of it. Just highlight of every time I saw the two of them together on screen, I was smiling.
Same. Yeah. I'll let you boys tag on that here. Get to some questions here and some comments. Eric Santiago says the "I will always be with you" combo between the Durans hit really hard. Over the relationship was prepared by series. I'm with you too. That just especially the last 3 years, not just with fathers and parents and that kind of stuff, just life, friendships. I've seen a lot of things in my own life be fractured, and a lot of differences and things have moved people I know apart, or moved me apart from people. That scene is powerful, even beyond what's inherently powerful about it, the father and son dynamic. So love that comment there. Shout out to Andy Ortiz. Andy checking in here with a super chat as well. Haskell, I haven't forgotten about you. You're going to get to your questions here in a second, but Rachel brought up some great stuff. The relationship between Elrond and Durin was provided a large amount of that warmth that you were talking about, Alden. And I see a lot of people, whether it's in my Discord, our buddy Eric Monroe, big Game of Thrones fan, he said, hey, that one's clicking for me as well, that relationship. I'm glad you didn't steal it, Alden, from Rachel's list.
I'm glad too, because Rachel, you have been the #1 fan of that story arc this whole time, and I'm so glad you were able to talk about it now, and that it ended in such a beautiful way, at least this chapter of it. And it was sad to not see Durin and Disa and the Elder Durin in that last episode, but where they ended was such a compelling point and such an interesting point for a serialized thing that's going to be ongoing with that cliffhanger. But yeah, so much of that. I mean, it speaks to, if you're fresh and this is like all you know of Lord of the Rings, which I'm also looking for that person. I haven't met that person yet, but this is their first Lord of the Rings thing, but I'd love to talk to them. But for those that know, that have at least seen the first 3 films, the language of like the elf and dwarf friend is there for you, but they didn't repeat Legolas and Gimli really at all. It was an entirely different tenderness that was established before the events of the show, that has perfect comedy, that the writing is just beautifully poetic. When you talk about the seedling and how Disa jokes that he's been tending to it like a third child. Yeah. And then Elrond says how could it not grow in a home such as yours? Robert Aramayo, I already loved you, man, as young Ned. I've been quoting you for years. Now it ends. I've been doing his young Ned I would literally do that at work. Like, get to some water. But he is amazing here. Yeah. And much like Morfydd Clark having to take one of the more iconic roles, and not just from an actor that no one knew, from an iconic actor like Hugo Weaving, and making it his own. It was so sensitively written, and that comment that we had from Eric about the "I will always be with you," that Durin the Third says, even in anger, sometimes anger most of all, and how that was a fresh thing, because I love that beat. That beat that's Hamlet, that's The Lion King, and appropriately it's everything that's riffed on Hamlet or The Lion King. Black Panther does it, and it's very Star Wars, that I will always be with you. But to put that spin on it was the dwarf spin. Sometimes even in anger, because we are that people. And yeah, King Gil-galad, who we'll talk about, he maybe meant it as a dig when he said that you're stout of heart, but he's not wrong. That is true. It's a good thing too.
Absolutely. Nicky, your thoughts on this, the time spent down digging deep in this series?
Yeah, I think I totally agree on the point of, Khazad-dûm being more than just, and obviously we know when we see it in Fellowship, it is already quite rundown. But I think even then, if you were to sort of build backwards from that movie, I don't think it would be as vibrant as it looked in this show. And that was really just a fun thing to see and change your maybe a lot of the more like casual perspectives on dwarves and what they're sort of capable of, and not just like sniffing rocks and in the dark. I think that was such a cool thing. And then just on the relationship in general between Elrond and Durin, I think one of the hardest things to say about this show is, well, my favorite character is this one person. I will say, I think if I was pushed to my limits to name one, I would say Elrond, which is also, I kind of felt, I felt a little bad at first because it's like they're about to push through all these characters we've barely seen and new ones and all this, and the one I stick with is the one who's been around for the movies for such a long time. But yeah, he was incredible. I also a huge fan of Robert Aramayo and especially what he brought here. And I think just to track this character as we sort of put pieces together, he's sort of this assistant speechwriter, idealist, and then become a diplomat to eventual sort of commander and refugee of sorts, and and all these massive beats that this guy's gonna go through. And I think it's such a cool start for this epic character in the 8 episodes we've gotten.
Can I jump on that real quick before we move off Elrond?
I was gonna name my favorite character. Clearly, Waldreg. Come on.
Waldreg. Honestly,
a Sauron truther.
He's a man of the times. He's the wrong kind of man of the times, but
he had a massive impact. You can't deny it.
Well, look, we'll talk about the Adar and villain stuff, but there's something to be said about Waldreg and how he might just get the greatest employee of the month award of all time now that Sauron is back. Like, it really is. But in terms of Elrond, you were talking about everything that we know is going to happen, right? Robert Aramayo said this is an idealistic character that's going to turn a little bit colder over time. It's a paraphrase, and we know that. We know, like, here's his best friend, a dwarf. By Fellowship, he's lost all faith in them and is very vocal about the fact that he's lost faith in them and has opinions on the way they run their business and their culture. And we know everything that's going to come, but also everything that's already happened that is conveyed through Elrond and a lot of characters. You get through the Númenóreans, through Galadriel. The show did an amazing job of dropping exposition in and dropping first stage information in and dropping background. Everything that happened, talk about parents and children, the whole, like, my dad turned into a star, for it. Like that, all of that. And or even in the finale, where did we first meet? I was an orphan boy, half elven orphan boy. You gave me water. All that stuff that happens when Galadriel steps up and is like, "I'm Galadriel, the Noldor of the House of Finarfin." Like everything that she says, it does a great job, like the Jackson movies did, of even if you have no idea what they're saying, you understand. It's like the way that Nicky, you told me, like, that Aaron Sorkin talks about writing like legal dialogue. Like, you don't need to know what it means; they know what it means.
Yeah, you need to know that they know what it means.
Exactly, and that it feels that way. Like, I remember watching Lord of the Rings as a kid. I didn't know what the blood of Númenor was. It took me until I was an adult to really be like, what did he mean by Men of the West? Like, I thought that you guys were here and you were here, and you don't need it. It just carries you through emotionally.
I love that there. I love that there. We're going to get to some individual stuff here. Want to talk Sauron, Halbrand, Galadriel. We're going to talk about that stranger. As you said, Gandalf, ? I call him Gandalf, Radagast, the Blue Wizard, Bombadil. We're just going to
cover all of this.
Yeah, put them all in there. I do want to get these super chats and questions here from first from Eddie Haskell. Hey, gang. Good evening. Love the show. Okay, question. In LOTR, it opens with Galadriel giving the history and how 3 rings are given to the elves and show them admiring them. Rings to men, rings to dwarfs. He continues here, but in the show, they create their own rings. So the show tweaked that part of the story, or did the film, or does Sauron give them another 3? One of those good kind of logistic questions. I turn to you, Rachel, first.
Rachel.
Tattoos to prove it.
Let's go.
I think Rachel has 9 rings just tattooed all over her.
So the The simplest version of it is that Sauron, as Anatar, helped the elves create 16 rings, and then he went and created the One Ring on his own. Now, the nuance is that he helped them, but did not physically ever touch or create the elven rings, where he did for the 9 for men and 7 for dwarves. Where I'm curious what the show has done. The show showed us that the elves, couldn't have made the rings without him. That's the point. So when the One Ring is made, all of these other rings are subservient to that because Sauron had a hand in it. But this was, we only saw the elven rings being made.
Right.
In the books, all of them are being made at this time. And then he goes and he does the One Ring. So what we don't know yet is maybe they did. Maybe that we knew that 3 weeks was sort of the outline of amount of time that was going on here. Yeah. There were many elven smiths there. Halbrand / Sauron could have been around and having touched and had a hand in all of the 9 rings and the 7 rings as well. We don't know yet. That's something that they chose not to disclose to us. They might decide that, Galadriel did not admit. She said Halbrand is gone and we shouldn't work with him anymore. But she doesn't say why. Elrond's clearly on his way to figuring out why. But Celebrimbor was pretty smitten with Halbrand because of all the great ideas he had. So would he come back in that guise, knowing if Galadriel's away or something like that, in order to sort of re-infiltrate Eregion and convince them? Then maybe they make the other 7 and 9.
Yeah.
We'll see.
And similar follow-up, and I'll let Nicky and Alden get in there. We got this question: does anyone think Sauron will take the guise of a new actor next season, continue his deceptive nature, or to get Halbrand for the long haul? Charlie Vickers is doing a great job, so I hope so. But Rachel, am I wrong in assuming that that's kind of not necessarily an actor change, but different disguises or guises? He is the man of many faces here, like Chris Jericho, the man of 1,000 holds. So. Anything like that come to mind for you, Rachel? Then I'll let Alden and Nicky follow up on the ring stuff too.
Given the general timeline, calendar of events, and the order of events that we know are happening, he could stay Charlie Vickers, and it wouldn't be a problem. But if there is still some manipulation, string pulling that he needs to do for people that know that Halbrand is Sauron, yes, he still has the power to change his appearance. He hasn't lost that as of yet. That comes later. So yeah, it'll be curious to see, because Galadriel's not telling the truth because she feels an enormous amount of guilt in regards to, he even says, he's like, what will your friends think when they find out that you aided the enemy? You saved the life of the enemy. So she's going to be that. I think it's going to be a trajectory for her next season, is dealing with that guilt, and then who to tell, what to tell, and then Sauron on the flip side, how he's going to manipulate that. But anyway, he could show up as Halbrand to the Southlanders who are now in Pelargir. He could show up anywhere else, and they don't know that he's Sauron.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think that Charlie Vickers.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, he's still a nice guy to some people. So if he showed up at Ken's, Ken would still believe.
I'm still gonna hear him out. All right. He's probably got some good barbecue to serve, like Big Loot and stuff out there.
He probably has a lot of tips on how to better barbecue.
Yeah. I'll hear Hal Sauron out. Anyway, sorry, Alden, I got you.
No, it's okay. I was just thinking about, obviously all the interviews start to come out and all the secrets start to get spilled. And Charlie Vickers did mention Anatar by name in an interview. And when they asked him about the future, he's like, well, there's this other form, Anatar, and that's all I can say right now. And so it was like that. Are you hinting that you're going to pull double duty? Are you hinting that something interesting like that could happen? I don't know. I don't want to speculate, especially because it's going to be a long off season. But the idea of changing the order of the rings is interesting.
Hope. They started shooting. There's hope.
There is hope, and I know they can. Jeffrey Bezos. I never thought I'd ask you for anything, but if you could just pump some extra cash into that schedule, that'd be great. But the way that they've done the 3 rings, I love that it was, we're going to go from 1 crown. Now we got to do 2 smaller things. And then it's Galadriel out of guilt. I love that it's personal, not just with Finrod's dagger being part of it, but it needs to be 3 for security, for almost like a personal atonement. She wants to carry part of the burden. I love all that. And I also love this sort of TV, we're in a reveals culture as much as that can be bad sometimes.
Yeah.
Who did Grogu call? Who is this? What is happening? Like, that's part of it, whether it's good or bad, depends on the thing. But it's interesting that they've set themselves up now for the 9 and the 7 to almost be perhaps a reveal to the elf characters, because Galadriel makes a point of this should only be for the elves. It would be interesting if Elrond does go to visit Durin, and then Durin the Third's like, by the way, check this out. And then they're like, where the hell did you get those? And something like he's already been gifting or something. I don't know. But I think they've set themselves up to do like 10 different things.
They have made some big leaps. And, you know, they generally speaking, I think, have worked. Given, like I've said before, like I don't need a letter of the law. I just need to make sure that you still get us where we need to get to, and do it in such a way that honors what Tolkien was writing about, the themes, the characters, and whatnot. So, you know, the elves make the rings with Sauron, the elven smiths. They don't really go into it, but there is like a core group of them, and Celebrimbor is their leader. But you know, this it was also supposed to take 300 years to make it. 300 years, 3 weeks.
Which you get the line about too, which is great.
But yeah, so like it I don't know how they're going to play, you know, the 7 and the 9 yet. If they're made and then there's reveals somehow, some way, or if they are just playing with a timeline and saying that the elves made the 3 on their own and that the 7 and 9 will be made at a later time. But it's but I don't think they can or shouldn't mess with the fact that it's the elven smiths.
I guess there's been a lot of writings that have come out, which is great. But I love the surge of Tolkien scholars and professors on Twitter that will post the letters and everything. I appreciate everyone that's doing that. Keep doing it. There's the thread today that went around that about why Galadriel is a perfect like #1 adversary and why she really sort of is. And in that, it talks about the elf.
She's the only one Tolkien wrote. She's the only one Sauron was ever worried about or scared of.
Yeah, which is wonderful. And I really like it. On the subject of Celebrimbor, before we get off of this entirely, before the pilot aired, the night of the premiere, I tweeted, I can't wait to say this effing guy every time Celebrimbor is on screen. And so help me, I did. That was true the entire season. At the end, when they are clearly worried and he's the only one that's like, hell yeah, we're so good at this. This is amazing. Even the way he was with Gil-galad, a new power. Like, that's the kind of guy that absolutely would be like, she's not around, come back in. So there's that too.
Yeah,
I loved his actor. I can't remember his name, but the Celebrimbor actor.
I think,
he was so good. I love that scene with Halbrand when he's like, "Man, is Celebrimbor here?" And he's like, "Whoa!" it was just he played that guy so well. He played his one-track mind so well. And yeah, it's gonna be very interesting.
Like a Willy Wonka, like just
yeah. It's gonna be a ride when we see how he goes along in this age.
I love that. Couple of questions coming in. Then I want to just to tee us all up here. I do want to talk about Galadriel, and I do want to talk. We talked a lot about Elrond already. We're gonna get to Sauron, the villains. We got Uncle Benjen showing up. A lot of great stuff to get to, and then an overall discussion on just the lore, the timeline, and any issues or questions we have going forward. Some great questions will come in. First of all, Oscar Film Forecast. Over at Force Center, we believe Oscar Film Forecast is actually his full name. It's Oscar Film Forecast, but I love having Oscar at it. This is my first experience with Middle Earth outside of Lego games, and I loved it. Started the LOTR movies a few days ago. Watch Return of the King tomorrow. Keep up the great work, everyone. Alden, that was to your question there, but I love hearing that. I'm all about entry points into franchises. We celebrate that in Force Center about Star Wars. You don't need to have fall in love with Star Wars in 1977 to 83 like I did. You could fall in love in 99, 05, 2015. I want to hear your story, and I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're at the party. I love hearing that. So, Rachel, what are your tattoo suggestions to Oscar Film Forecast?
You can steal mine if you want. I don't know if I've told this story. The Elvish line I have in the back of my neck is one ring to find them, and I got tattooed with my family. So my parents, my sister, and I all went, and we each got a line from the poem. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to break them all, and in the darkness bind them. So we each have one of the lines. And
who has in the darkness bind them?
My dad.
Yeah.
Dad energy right there.
I want the cool line.
Yeah. I wanted the short one. Yeah. Because I was the only one. I didn't have any tattoos at that point. I was like 21, but yeah, so I went with the short one. I was like, give me the short line. And my mom's like, well, one ring to rule them all is mine. We all like, yeah, we know. So yeah, that's what we did. And then awesome. So you can do that. And I have a Lorien leaf as well, because the elves have just always in Galadriel, everybody at this point knows. And then I have not all those who wander on my arm. Tolkien quotes, and that is actually from the Fellowship of the Ring. It's a line from a poem that Bilbo writes about Aragorn. And a lot of people will see it like, I'm a big hiker too, and hikers will say that and not understand that it's from Lord of the Rings. And I'm like, it marries two of my favorite things.
It's a very big Instagram caption, and I often wonder that too. Like, do they know, or like the glitters is gold? Do they think that's actually Led Zeppelin, or do they?
Right. Yeah.
Great stuff there. And Nicky and Alden, what's your reaction to Oscar saying there? Like, hey, I'm new to this outside of games, and now I'm in it, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, I always feel like it's one of those things where, you know, we grew up in a time where the Lord of the Rings movies were one of the like major sort of cultural stamp. Like I always say, like I was a kid in 2002, this greatest year of my life. Like it was, you know, it was Star Wars, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, all coming out in the same year. And so I'm always really fascinated when I meet somebody who hasn't seen them. And it's almost like this precious thing, this precious thing to find, because it's like all my friends have already seen it, and to then get always feel like there's this epic experience when you find somebody who hasn't seen it. You'd be like, oh, I can be the one to guide you through it. So, I hope, Oscar, you have a good bunch of friends, you know, to go through this with you, because it is super fun to be part of the sort of community as you are even just watching this.
Yeah. And because alone it's a journey, adventures are to be shared. That might be a paraphrase. I watched the show we're talking about. But yeah, I'm always fascinated by that. I've told the story 1,000 times. But to my nephew, Luke Skywalker's an old man. Right. And that came as a shock to me, where I'm playing Battlefront 2 as classic Return of the Jedi Luke, and he didn't know who that was, because my sister, his mother, had just taken him to see The Last Jedi in the park. They were screening it, and that really blew my mind. And then you start to find people that are, well, Clone Wars was everything to me, or Rogue One was the one, or people you see that with Spider-Man when No Way Home came out. Who's is your Spider-Man? What's the deal there? And how a whole group of people got viscerally disappointed when they just canned Batgirl, because that would have been the return of their Batman. And that is such a personal thing. And the idea that this could be someone's Lord of the Rings is so fascinating to me. And I've even had that same nephew ask me, you know, Theo, they're doing the Rings of Power. I saw that, and I don't know if I should. Is that before? Do I watch the Rings first? My stepdad, who's a super casual about all this, has said to me, like, oh, so is this like what they talk about at the beginning? And I'm like, we'll back it up even further. Like, so to have those conversations is really fun. And I think it's a special thing that gets more and more rare, because nerds rule the world, and you have to get really excited about it as much as you can. And I'm excited to see. I mean, I don't want to rush time. I don't want to do a 10-year time skip. If any like gods or wizards are listening, I don't want to do that. But in 10 years, there's going to be somebody that talks about this show in the same way that, you know, my uncle talked about the animated Hobbit, and that's going to be really, really surreal. And they'll be making their next thing, because now all the, you know, this is not a business podcast, but while this show is going on, the rights changed again, and now Embracer has, I think, everything. Question mark. We don't know. 10 years from now, it could be someone doing the Strider show that we maybe didn't want to happen, and they're like, Rings of Power inspired me to do this. And suddenly it won't just be the Peter Jackson conversation. Which is really weird.
Absolutely. First of all, I know you said that your nephew said Tio, because I know what that means, but I thought I heard it as Theo, And I thought that's weird that Alden makes his family call him Theo.
Well, you know, I too want to be a
wanted to know his
warrior.
favorite character.
Yeah, I will say,
Yeah.
is Theo my favorite? Perhaps not, but Nikki, you and I did talk about this off air. Definitely, and the actor was always great. This is not an acting thing.
Yeah.
The cast, incredible, but most improved as a written character throughout the season, where he at any point he could have made very TV teenager choices, and he never did.
Yep.
He listened. He was able to connect with different kinds of people, and he was a great character.
Good glow up for our
But
guy.
now I'm very afraid for him because I think he could be the Witch King.
No,
Oh.
we're gonna move all theories down to Theo.
Oh, we got some theory talk coming up.
Like, think about, you know, he really the send off for Halbrand from this the Southlanders, and the way Theo has the sword and the way that he cheers. He's the one that, you know, starts the cheer for their king and whatnot. And all I could see was like him. He's a soldier now,
and he is wounded, right? He got the same Waldreg wound,
right? So that still is in him in some way, shape, or form. He has, you know, proven himself to be strong enough to resist it up until this point and do the right thing and not go with Waldreg and all of that stuff. But I feel like, and that was the thing with the ring wraiths too. They were great men. Ring wraiths. There you go. Yeah. You know, they didn't take the rings because they wanted to bow down to Sauron and become wraiths. Yeah. They wanted to take the rings to do good. They wanted to rule their kingdoms. They wanted the power that it came with it. That they, you know, they were all eventually corrupted. That's what all of the rings, save the elven rings, do. And that's the dwarf rings did as well. So,
well, poor Theo. We'll root for you here, but you know, I'm telling you, Halbrand's a good guy. Halbrand's a good guy. Oscar Falls, I do have a good fellowship guided me through my first watch, thankfully, and I've got this crew as well. Oh, thank you, Oscar. And one final thought there before we move on to some theory talk, and then we get into in terms of like what we're talking about with Oscar, what they're sharing, the Oscar Film Forecast. You know, this is, and it's a bigger discussion that we can have here on this show, or you know, future episodes. We're definitely not done talking Rings of Power on Casterly Talk. The legalities, the words they can't say, the time crunch, all those kind of things. And Rachel, you had a lot of great questions during the season, and maybe some answers emerged, and maybe you still have some. But the rancor of it online, I always almost say rancor as if the rancor monster is Discord. But the rancor online, it's disappointing and frustrating in a lot of ways to me. But more than any other way, it's if you're a lifelong Tolkien fan, and maybe you don't love the show, understood. But by you railing against it and going along and maybe trying to get it, you know, you'll never get it shut down, but just trying to shut down the joy on it, you're stopping someone else from coming into this world and discovering the films and going to the books and going to the world of Tolkien and celebrating it with you. And that's one of the things that I think I love doing here. And it's not just a blind celebration. It is looking at this world and engaging with it and finding how it can change your heart. And I love hearing new people in there. And that's been one of the frustrating things around this show and all the shows. It's not just this fandom, it's every fandom. Of the people spend so much time trying to have some sort of ownership on it, or trying to feel above it with their critiques, or the bad faith critiques, not the good discussion points, that you keep people out. Because why would you? Oh, I like Rings of Power. You heretic! How dare you like Rings of Power? Oh, well, you know what? I was new around these parts. I'm going to leave this bar. You all have fun, and I love inviting more people in, and that's why I love hearing this story. We're focused on it a little bit here. So,
all right. Well said. Well said.
Oh, quiet you. No.
Vigorously anti-gatekeeper. We're going to have our own Gron. Destroy the gates.
Yeah, no, in many ways. All right, Renegade Liv checks in and says, a huge thanks to all of you for a fantastic Season 1 discussion. I love the theories you guys debated. Related, do you have any theories as to why Sauron would have been on that raft in the first place? And from this, I'd love to get into a discussion of the villains in the show here. Who wants to? This is a big one. I don't have any hard concrete theory. I have just a spiritual answer, whether he is trying to just float and I personally believe that Sauron, this version of him, this face, has some sort of remorse, some sort of wrestling with it. It's just what you choose to do with that, and I'm going to make everything good by controlling it is a danger. So that's why he does at times reflect the light. So spiritually, I think he was just wandering. Tolkien does love his happy accidents there. So anyone want to jump in with a big theory here?
There is always that, but like especially on the rewatch, you can see the early Halbrand stuff with Galadriel, that he's always weighing things in his head and decisions. And it, like we discussed when we talked about the final episode in the reveal, like everything that Halbrand / Sauron was doing felt generally genuine. Like not that that this was I'm gonna get myself on this raft because I know Galadriel's gonna be there, and I'm gonna just I don't think that was the case at all. So I do think that like the way I put it in my head was like Sauron was having a crisis of faith. You know, he had gone up against Adar. Now, exactly how that battle went, we don't know. I mean, Sauron clearly didn't die, but it was bad. He had to leave Fordwith. He hadn't discovered the dark powers that he wanted to discover. Morgoth's gone, and he used to be a Maya. He used to be one of the good guys. He used to be a pure angelic spirit of Valinor. And so I don't know, was he trying to get back to Valinor? Was he trying to being out there and facing west? Is there the smallest chance of being able to repent, being accepted back in there? Because right now I've lost my way in terms of, all my big plans for healing, ruling Middle Earth haven't been going so great, But I the episode's called Adrift, and it just felt like that was applicable to both Galadriel and Sauron, and not just in a literal way.
I think it's a great thematic point there that we are all naturally focusing on Galadriel, and our discussion probably took some of Halbrand's story into account. We just didn't know, but now that you know, it might kind of emerge there. I love what you're saying there, Alden. Any thoughts on how he got there and where's he going?
Yeah, I've seen some interesting things. There's in a lot of the theories, like they might not line up perfectly or whatever. Like there's a multiple comets theory that I've seen, like maybe that's why the three were confused, was because maybe maybe they did know, hey, our guy will come down in a comet. Awesome. Where's a comet? Where did a comet fall? And maybe one of them did hit the seas. There's that. Maybe it was he was there with other travelers. Maybe he got on their ship or paid his way on or became a member of their crew to try to get to Numenor, which we know he would have probably preferred to have stayed in at a certain point. And then they maybe overshot it or got caught up in this monster fight and ended up elsewhere. Or maybe it was going all the way west. I almost think it's one of those things that doesn't need to be answered, although I would be interested in the answer. If there's the season 2 premiere as the Sauron Adar showdown and then ending up lost, that would be really interesting. But I think that thematically the Adrift stuff and the way that comes back later on, which is like we find ourselves on another raft or whatever the exact quote is, I love sort of how that played throughout, how it ties in with Finrod, which is the murder that ties them together emotionally before they even realize that that's what it is. I mean, he does. But like the fact that he is, it adds a level of darkness and perversion to so many moments that he swims underneath and uses the dagger of the brother he killed to free her. And he knows who she is. That element is just so, it's so enriching. And it's that great thing about going back when you have that knowledge, how it recontextualizes everything. But as for how, I don't really know, but I do love everything that's been said. Like I said before, lots of great Tolkien scholars, Rachel, you included, that have pointed out this whole idea of the Lucifer-esque quality of him having been this angelic being, and how Tolkien was ambiguous to my understanding of, did he run and hide out of fear? Did he run and hide out of fear of not being forgiven? Was it tactical? Was it not? And that's all sort of like, all we know is that he probably saw his boss in chains and thought, that ain't for me. What the motivation is behind that is interesting. Like I don't know. It's maybe the parent-child theme even extends to Sauron and the gods.
Yeah. Maybe he quoted Jar Jar and said, "Egad's better dead here than in the core."
Yes,
maybe.
Exactly.
Great stuff here. Nicky, are you like me? You just think, this great guy was just tooling around looking for friends? No?
Dude, anything's possible now. but no, I think like as far as specifics, I I don't know. It's one of those, again, I'm sort of like Alden, where it's like I'm not seeking an answer, but when it's given, I'll be happy to see. And like, so like in terms of, what I would just guess, I'd say maybe the conflict with Adar was not too far in the past, and he's sort of been licking his wounds from that. And then I think it's such an interesting thing how they done Sauron, because it's like even I thought I was having to balance the finale in my head, because it's like on one hand I really enjoyed it, on another hand some stuff really bothered me about it. I still feel like there's the end of episode 5 beat just feels a little imbalanced for me, but I think that's what's so interesting about how they've chosen to do him, is because there is so much ambiguity, and like what random letter or something hidden somewhere, what are they drawing upon exactly to fill him out. And I think in an obvious statement, I think season 2 is going to be so important and valuable in telling us where he's been, why he's like this, what his thing was, why did he want to stay in Numenor,
why are you like this?
Honestly, and I think that will go a long way in sort of if there were any issues anyone had in how the season 1 reveal was done, I think they have the chance to go a long way in massaging some of the finer points out and making him really sort of feel like the Sauron I think we should know, because it's like, I think there's the other thing, it's like, did I just have expectations for who he was, and the show's now sort of like beat up on him a little bit, and like, does that make me uncomfortable, or is it something the show did? So I think it's just more time. I feel like we can know, make better judgment.
And to be clear, because Alden talked about this on the show too, this is the end of episode 5 beat. This is the shot where Halbrand's like, I ain't going, and he comes back and grabs the necklace and is like, yeah, F it, I'm going, because I'm going to be good. I understand both of you have this. You brought up the point of, hey, it might read different once the reveal is happening, because the only thing there is him and a camera. No one else is seeing that moment, which is played for a bit of a hero moment. Rachel, having just rewatched it, I don't remember you bringing up that specific point of contention or anything like it, or just question. Not saying contention for these two here, but did you have any different take on that now watching it with it all behind you?
Generally speaking, during the rewatch, just about all of it worked for me, knowing where we ended up. I mean, having had the suspicion pretty much from episode 3 on helped. What I think is interesting because of its unexpectedness is I knew that Galadriel and Elrond would be younger versions of the characters we already knew. And that they would be different than the characters we knew, with the idea being that they would grow into that and we would see a lot of the reasons as to why. I never thought they'd do that with Sauron. Because, I mean, like Nicky was saying, like, he's the big bad. He is that way from minute 1 in the trilogy. He's a giant eye, like evil, no nuance, no nothing. So that, in terms of expectation, is we knew he'd be in a physical human form, but we just figured he would be 100% manipulative within that form in order to do all the things that he has to do in the Second Age. Instead, the writers were like, nope, we're going to turn this on their head, and we're going to actually give him character arcs and character beats and moments of indecision or having to make a decision. In episode 5, the conversation he has with Galadriel reads very interestingly, knowing for sure that he is Sauron. Just her reasoning, like he's saying, "Who did you lose?" knowing who she lost. But he is looking for something in her. And it is that conversation, because she tells him the line that Finrod told her about, to know which way the light, you have to touch the dark. She says that to Halbrand. And to me, that's a little bit of a light bulb for him. And so that's what he's mulling over now. And I really do believe it's not romantic. It's not love. He's not capable of love, but he sees an opportunity in her as somebody who could potentially see things the way that he does, and that maybe he wouldn't be so alone in that, you know, and that's why they actually, there is something they both understand about each other, and that is problematic because it's your good guy and your bad guy, but that's what the show brought to the table that I so loved, which is she's got darkness in him, and she's got darkness in her, and maybe, just maybe, there was a little bit of light trying to break through in him, such that we have a journey for him, which we never really thought was going to be the case.
Yeah.
Well said.
She's got a way about her. She might be that. I just have to ask her.
No, I was just gonna say, like, another thing I also really like applauded how they went about it. I think there's something so amazing to tighten the personal stakes about it, right? Like, you know, before we may have imagined, even just looking at the Hobbit movies, the Dol Guldur confrontation now feels totally different in how sort of you know, if you look at this show and how just sort of again, I say this in a non-romantic way, how intimately they were together, right? And I think there's something just so cool about now thinking about Galadriel, and I think Elrond now suspects some things too, possibly, but it's like, it just feels so different now to now, instead of, oh yeah, we got to fight Sauron because he's bad. Now also, we got to fight him. He came in our house, he sniffed our pillows, and he left, right? Like, and there's something that almost like extra violating about that. Like he came in and he messed with us, like personally. And so like, I really do enjoy like that aspect that they've now added. That's something going back to expectations. Sure didn't expect that, right? Like,
not at all.
And
even in the pilot, like, they give us the same sort of it's John Howe, right? The John Howe iteration of Sauron, where they give that, and it's like, I know what that is. You know, you get that. Like, there's a few things in that pilot that's like eagles. Oh, the fell beast. Oh my God, it's the classic looking Sauron, and of course his Balrog as well is in the show, where it sort of makes you think, when I see him, he'll be that, and then it's not. And I love what you said about those personal stakes and how he sort of got in and manipulated all of us. Those different storylines that he touched, down to really fun things now of he's directly saved Elendil.
I know,
which is like, oh buddy, that's going on. Top of the list of your regrets is going to be right there, and we'll talk about Isildur too. And Rachel, I know you said you had the Isildur thoughts that we'll get into, but the way that all plays now contextually is so interesting, and I love the exactly. Look at that's what we got.
That's right.
Yeah. And I will say honestly, like, maybe we should just make that, like, where's the dating app that's like, I'm not interested in you romantically, I just want power, intimacy, I want to rule something. That's what he was. It's like, I mean, we kiss, I guess, but like, I'm talking about thrones. I'm talking about healing a land. Like, it was definitely an interesting way to play that for him. And I will say, if I have to make any Sauron predictions, I will say that Waldrig's about to have the best time ever, and Adar is about to have the worst time ever. Adar versus Sauron 2. Can we do that like Clegane Bowl? Can we get some air horns?
Gonna be there.
Sauron Bowl.
I want to get to Adar here in a second. But I don't know. For me, I got about a half hour left. But Alden can talk all night. He told me he doesn't go to sleep. And by the way, Nicky, and Rachel, all of you, Alden, great points on Sauron. I think it's been one of the more rewarding things for me, and I think it's only going to get better on rewatch. Even some questions, and it's great to have those questions. We love those questions here. But also, I'm putting down on my notes: do not invite Nicky into your house. Sniffing pillows. You went there pretty fast. You went there real fast.
I learned from the best.
Who's that?
Yeah.
Don't look at me.
That's right. Yeah. Alden did say he could maybe come out and stay in your apartment. That tracks.
I should have broken in while I was there. I really should have.
Talking about the other villain, this was kind of the villain that carried us throughout the season, and I think the show, without a doubt, had some fun with the idea of, hey, you've probably heard Sauron's around. Who is it? Who's it going to be? I think that's okay to have that kind of fun with these shows. It's modern day storytelling nowadays, and it's that water cooler or water Skype chat talk. Joseph Mawley, Uncle Benjen, who I absolutely love in Game of Thrones. I love that he came back, but his season 1 stuff, it's still some of my favorite stuff in the show. Love the relationship with him and Jon Snow. Shows up here, and he is a wonderful villain in every way, but also did something special for this whole fandom. And I don't want to speak out of turn for the rest of the fandom, Rachel. I'll let you back me up or say I'm wrong in this, but just add new context and depth to the orcs themselves that even Tolkien had wrestled with over the years. We've seen some of his notes. You can go find videos about that. I love just his presence. I love what he brought, and I love that there was a certain point in time all the way through the season where he'd say some things, and I'm like, I think he's bad, but I think I like him. And I love when you do that. And again, it's not a gray area. It is a gray period of time or a question that is complicated. You still have to choose which way to go with it. He chose themes a long time ago. Rachel, I will start with you because we spent a lot of time talking about Uncle Benjen over the years together. What do you think about this Adar character here?
I thought it was a great ad, again, rooted in something that Tolkien wrote or made a notation about or something, the idea of the dark elves. And then beyond that, elves being the original orcs. So they took that and they ran with it in a way that, that idea on its own as a bad guy, that's great. But then to make him a bad guy who is a father. Do you know what I mean? Like he's called Adar, and he, based on how he was tortured and tormented by Morgoth and everything else, has an affinity and an emotional tie to orcs. And we've never had an emotional tie to orcs before.
Right.
Why would we? They're the cannon fodder. They're the thousands and thousands of creatures that our good guys have to, cut a swath through to throw the ring in the Mount Doom. But it's never been explored as a culture. It's never been explored in terms of them as individuals. And so you bring in a villain and you have him act so paternal and so caring about this race that we've never cared about before. And then he starts giving you reasons why they have just as much right to, they're worthy of life just as much as the elves are. His conversation with Galadriel is brilliant in the, I'm not the only elf that has allowed darkness into my soul. The mirroring that is happening there is just wonderfully done. But as a whole, it's taking little pieces from Tolkien and going, what can we build out of this that is true to what he wrote, but then can expand on it in a new and frankly more modern way to have the orcs not be blank-faced evil creatures that just have to be murdered in the thousands. Like that there is more to it. And are they deserving of life? Are they deserving of a home? All of this. They'll do heinous things to get it. Okay. But there's a but. And that's the interesting way I never saw this going. And so again, good for the writers for finding things rooted in Tolkien, but that are still surprising for those of us that know all the lore and everything else. And I wish more lore people were open to that. And it's unfortunately that so many of them are like, letter of the law, like this is not how this happened, this is not how this happened, and therefore it's bad. That's not the case. Like I'm so excited by the fact that these writers who clearly love Tolkien's work are expanding on it while keeping the core in place.
Yeah, I really second what you say there. Again, going back to my conversation point earlier about just gatekeeping for no real reason. But beyond that, Nicky, I'll turn to you here with the orcs. It wasn't quite. We all talk about Star Wars as well. It was a different flavor than what, say, the Book of Boba Fett or even some of the episodes of Mandalorian did for the Tuscans of the Dune Sea. We now have a different look on them, simply because they took what Lucas was playing with in the 70s, which was a trope, a trope that sometimes dangles its feet in problematic waters, and they went back and said, let's look at this in a different way. And now I can't go back to New Hope and see the Tuscans of the Dune Sea as I don't even like calling them the Tuscan Raiders. They sometimes refer to themselves as that. That's fine. I see them differently now. I'm not saying I'm going to root for orcs, Nicky. I'm not saying I'm on their team. It just adds a depth I wasn't expecting, right? And you know a little about irredeemable characters. You work with Charlie Ashby.
You nailed it right there.
Well, that's a clip that's coming out.
There we go. Yeah, no, I totally agree with all of that. Everything you said, and echoing what Rachel said. I think, I think after the third or fourth, I remember texting Alden and being like, these orcs feel more human than they've ever felt, and like more like a species. And also I feel like the scariest they've ever felt, maybe because of that. And like especially jump in. You know why? Because I felt, and this isn't I felt for the first time, Jackson's orcs are fine. They're dangerous. They're scary. I felt these orcs had some stakes in the game.
They were way more. It was the like
time with
water
the
rations scene,
right?
Is like that's a methodology that's really weird.
Everything in the trench digging kind of scenario. It was like definitely a totally different flavor. It's like they look how we remember them from the films, very similar still. But I think it's a Jed Brophy.
Yes,
played one of them and like played not like a bunch and a dwarf. But yeah, it's it was really interesting to see that. And then with Adar, it's like the same point of ever since we heard Christopher Lee say they were elves once, right? Like ever since he said that, that's been like one of those that's like, oh yes, I fought in the Clone Wars, same as your father. Like it's one of those things where it's like just this little line opened up all the sort of imagination, and then reading into the expanded stuff, sort of that's further developed. But being able to now create a character who's living out that line and what that does to him, how that has informed his worldview, and the father figure to the orcs, and then now with Sauron coming back into his picture, you would assume it. I almost wonder like how much are we gonna recontextualize him, like almost as a anti-hero perhaps, and how he butts up against Sauron and what his goals are. So it remains just really interesting in how, again, like season 2, whenever it lands, hopefully sooner rather than later, I think they've just set up a lot of these really interesting new stakes, new things to dig into, and that's again just a success of this season.
Love it. And Alden, I'll bring you in on this here in a second, but a great comment here from James Farley. It's one of the wonderful things about adaptation. Those orcs are such a 21st century take on Tolkien. What's the point of retelling these stories if we don't let them speak to our world now? I think that's brilliant, James. I think that's a great one. And that's when you can find ways to do that. We're dealing with timeless themes. We're dealing with a timeless property in a way. We are telling them in a new world, and you have to be aware of that. And I think this is a great example of it. And Adar, Uncle Adar, or Father Adar, Father, that would
orc hands, if you will.
Yeah, orc would be in the center of it all.
Yeah, I mean, this is that 21st century take line speaks to so much of what we're talking about. Of course, we invoke Star Wars. We're all fans, but the Stormtroopers didn't have a face until that Thanksgiving teaser trailer. And that was that's the John Boyega guy. He's going to be a main character. Oh, he was a Stormtrooper. And then how that starts to unpack. And since we've done so much for the nameless faceless Imperials, and it makes me think of Adam Driver talking about playing villains. He's like, it's not about good and evil, it's about who thinks they're right.
Yes.
And for evil, they have that. And you can have fun and say, I was saying this to a friend the other day, like, when you look at Galadriel or Gil-galad or any of the leaders and powerful beings, none of them have done as much to stop Sauron as of late than Adar has. Adar's got a Sauron victory on his record. Maybe Sauron let him have it. I don't know.
We'll find out the details, but right now he can claim it on the back of his baseball card.
Exactly. Yeah, the Adar card, rare. It's really goth looking. It's awesome. And that idea that he could be the anti-hero, when we get to I think I'm going to start calling it Mordor Bowl. Like, are we going to be rooting for this guy because, yeah, you're evil. We've seen what you've done, especially with Mount Doom and everything. But you are not workable. You got to go too. But there's this idea of
I know what you mean.
You had something there that was valid. You had something that made us feel. I'll spend the one wrestling reference of the week token on there was a time. You don't need to know who these people are. There was a bad guy named Triple H and a good guy named Sting. And there's a viral video where someone from the front row yells, "He's got a great point, Sting." And that's how I felt when Adar was talking. It's like when he talks about are we not worthy of a home, the breath of life? We were also made of is it the sacred fire or the secret fire? I can't remember.
Secret fire.
Secret fire. And it's like, I mean, is he wrong? Like they didn't sign up. They're not Imperials. They did not enlist. They were taken and tortured and transformed and getting to visualize an early version of that where he has a little bit of scarring and his facial features are a little bit more like sort of gaunt and like he's been through it, but you can tell that he was a proto. Like that was it got worse and that he had to bear witness to that. His lieutenants and other guys, like I wish I knew their names, and maybe they do have names, like how we eventually learned the trilogy names of orcs, but you got the really like Lurtz, his core group, they've lost all semblance of humanity visually. It's gone. And the fact that he's able to strike these chords through things like the burning scene, like "Give me your arm," and it's a really dark thing, and you are hurting them. But he's underlining this point of, I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen, and it's like that is benevolence in its way, and that's what made him so compelling. And you got the right actor. And again, I cannot say this enough. Like I've acted, but like community theater was my peak. The idea of the right scene partners. So we talked about Robert Aramayo and then Owen Arthur as Durin and Elrond. Morventh Clark and Joseph Mall here, incredible. Like they were on fire making these parallels, and the fact that we talked about in our episodes that she does a villain speech and he does a hero speech and how they play. It doesn't get better than that.
The piked ear line sticks with
you. Right.
She's amazing. I cannot stress how badly I want them to do. And I love you, Andy Serkis, and I never want you to stop reading stuff. But if they could do the Morventh Clark readings of the books on Amazon or something, that'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be great. I love this comment from Lauren Romo, who has been on and will be on again on Casterly Talk. As a strictly LOTR movie fan, this season hit so well. Felt like the world jacks about visually, but also something new. The story was great. And I can't wait for season 2. All hail Sauron. Oh, no, we've lost Lauren to the
go.
Right there. In the time we have remaining, not rushing anybody here, but, I always have those chihuahuas to feed. I do want to talk about, and anyone out there in the audience got some questions, please send them on in. We will get to them here. You're talking about Galadriel here. I think this is almost burying the lead. This was very much, I guess I'll say, I think it's very much her season, but many other characters around here, to be clear. It's an ensemble. I could talk about Lloyd Owens acting as Elendil for hours. I love him. And as Indiana Jones' father in the Indiana Jones Chronicles. I'll start with you, Rachel. Talk about expectations. This was unless I'm completely wrong, this was your character, so to speak, right? I associate her with you. Not only because you did that great, famous intro where you were her. Along the way, it's been different, and you mentioned already it's a different take, or it's a different point in her life before we get to other areas that you're more familiar with, or it's a journey. Take me through your thoughts on her in this season as of right now.
First and foremost, Morventh Clark is absolutely nailing it in the sense of giving her a three-dimensional emotional conflict. Mm-hmm. Like, you understand everything that's going on, and therefore you can see the inner fight, be the egotistical elf that, in some ways people expect, or you were used to being treated as, or whatever. Other times, slow down, think about it from a different perspective. That's the when they're both in the cells in Numenor, and Halbrand's telling her, you know, like, how did you go about this? Like, think about it, you know, in terms of like, you know, find out what their greatest fear is. She's like, to exploit it. And he's like, no, so that you can find a way to conquer it, help them, and then move on from there, develop relationships.
Yeah.
She wasn't very good at developing relationships. And it's a massive stretch. And I read something on Twitter
That's dangerous.
I know, very. I'm aware. Somebody rather articulately who didn't like what was happening a lot in the show came at it from again, Tolkien wrote thinly about all of this stuff. There's pieces here and there. It's not a fully fleshed out story. The thing about the elves was he kind of always was one step removed from them. They were these ethereal, wise, inscrutable kind of characters. And that doesn't work in television and movies. You can't have inscrutable characters. You're not going to care about them. So now we're seeing elves who make rash decisions, wrong decisions, are power hungry, are antagonistic toward each other, will lie to each other. Like the Gil-galad portrayal has been very interesting in the sense that I do think that like his heart's in the right place, but it's like the way he's doing it is sort of underhanded, lying to Elrond about the Mithril and all of the different stuff. So we're seeing elves not as these pedestal type visions, which is kind of how Tolkien portrayed them, but as real characters with real flaws. And I get it. Some massive fans are like, those aren't elves. Elves have to be bigger and better and more beautiful and, you know, live up to that sort of inscrutable nature. Again, not going to work in a TV show though. So if it's not going to work in a TV show, what do you do with them? And this show has been exploring all the avenues, first and foremost with Galadriel, you know, giving her a vengeance storyline, giving her an inability to communicate and work with people to get what her own ends, to understand that you don't have to be bullish all the time, to understand you don't have to threaten to get what you want. And you see her start to grow little by little. And again, in when she's talking to Theo, some of those conversations are just the most amazing because you see there's more underneath and like how hurt and broken she is on the inside. And therefore that's how Sauron is trying to manipulate her. He's trying to use that, like again, in the scene where in episode 5, where they're in the smith shop and she goes in to apologize and then trying to convince him to show up in the throne room the next morning. She's being very vulnerable and she tells him, my squad of soldiers mutinied against me. My best friend conspired with my king to send me away. Like nobody's ever been on my side. And that's how she feels. Her back's up against the wall. And then Sauron later uses that as like ammunition against her during like the fever dream of manipulation, where he's like, you've been dismissed. You've been unheard. You've been people have walked out on you and manipulated you and everything. So he's using all the things that she said to him in this other scene against her, which is just something, again, when you binge, you see those things a lot easier. But anyway, the Galadriel of it all is, yes, she's very different than in the books. But I'm enjoying this idea of the elves are not pedestal characters. She's not a pedestal character. She's not Cate Blanchett yet. She's got to go through a whole heck of a lot to get there. And that's a journey I want to go on.
Well said. Nothing else to add to that. Great. No, I love what you're saying too, because I think from I always say I'm not an outsider to this world. I love these stories and love these characters so much, but I'm not as intimately aware of some of the details. I have that view of the elves, right? Like, oh, elves, man, elves show up. You're looking good. They're looking good. You're looking good, and the heroes have arrived. And I think I love a lot more of the depth that was presented here. I love the failures of Galadriel. I love the stuff. She's badass in the beginning, but also pisses off her team and everyone else, and they're give her an award and pack her up. Get on out of here. We're set. Guess what? You get early retirement. I think I was drawn in from that there and excited to see where we can go with that. Alden, I know I'll cap you at 2 minutes and 32 seconds on Galadriel.
Yeah, I mean, really, so much of it comes down to Morva and how incredible she is, but she did do a lot to not walk back what Jackson had done with the elves, but to present a new layer. Because when you think about our non-main character elves in Jackson's trilogy, like the company that goes with Haldir to Helm's Deep, perfect lockstep, perfect form, perfect everything, silent. When you witness them walking through the forests on their way out, on their way to leave this land, it's like they don't look like they even talk to each other, let alone infight, let alone have opinions. Like they are either Legolas and Arwen and Elrond, or they are perfect. And to see those shades, I think, for me has been great, especially with, the conversations that have been happening about how in some of Tolkien's like later writings and revisitings, like, was it this is the humbling of the elves? Like maybe you all were clinging too hard to this image of this heavenly place and you thought that you could just have that again, and you were all one track minded. And I love the contrast that happens, not just in the Jackson stuff and in the other adaptations, but the fact that it's a moment, and I wish I could credit this person and I should have screenshotted it, but it was a beautiful, beautiful observation that when Sadak and Poppy and Marigold are faced with death, Marigold just closes her eyes and says, "Don't worry, it'll be over soon. It'll be over in a flash," or whatever she says. And it's like, that is so antithetical to what Durin the Third accuses the elves of, which is, "I will not help them cheat death." And it's the idea, and whether or not that's fair reading or not is, Durin the Third's, he's a hardline guy, but the way that was emphasized with the Harfoots of like, that's why your descendants are going to be the ones. That's why, because you are humanity first. You have none of the on high nature.
Yeah.
Love it there. Nicky, thoughts on Galadriel?
Yeah, definitely. I think just to say what everyone else is saying, you got to give so much credit to Morpeth Clark and what she brought. And I feel a great camaraderie with her. I do. She doesn't know who the hell I am. But the small piece of Welsh lineage I have, we're both Blood of the Dragon. I love seeing a Welsh actor, and front and center of one of the biggest shows in the world right now. And so that was great. And then I think just to agree with what everyone said, and just sort of my little piece is similar to the Elrond point of like just knowing where they go. I think it's so interesting to have seen her, not connect with the kids in Valinor. They're literally like sinking her boat.
You guys are on TikTok? I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I'm LinkedIn and that's it.
So she doesn't connect with them. She's literally leaving her company behind on the mountainside, and then to know she's going to be I don't need a sword, I'm powerful enough, and then B, the guide for the Fellowship. Because if it's the same Galadriel, she's not handing out the bows and the knives and the rope and the light of her best friend's daddy. She's getting in the boat with them. Like she's like, okay, let's go. Like we're gonna go take on Sauron. Yeah, I'm with you. But she gets to a point where she now learns like, I'm bigger than that. I can be more than that, and I'm gonna facilitate the heroism of others. So I think that's a really, really interesting thing to see how far they take her along for however long Rings of Power goes.
I love that. Sauron? I dated him. I'm going with it. 2 weeks. It was a thing. It was a weird thing. I'm going with you.
I'd say it's also a trajectory towards humbling them. As elves, they're called the Eldar. They're the first children of Eru, and they are bigger, better, immortal, wiser. Like they are all these things. And when you believe in your own hype for so long, but you still can't get the job done. They didn't beat Morgoth. They had to intermingle the races to get to Ariandil, who could sail across to Valinor, be let in, and then the Valar came. They beat Morgoth. And then in Middle Earth, we already know the end of this series. It's the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring. Once again, they think they've taken Sauron out, but they don't actually. Like, so many times the elves want to do the right thing, try to do the right thing. They're there to be in Middle-earth, as Gil-galad says, to help it from descending into the shadow, but they aren't the ones who accomplish the task in the end. And so I think that the sort of firebrand nature of Galadriel, she'll get wiser to get to the Cape Blanche of it all, but I also think she'll get humbled to get to the Cape Blanche of it all.
Ooh, that's a great point. See, folks, that's why Rachel's on the team. I just yell bad jokes. In the time we have left, and there's a lot we haven't discussed. Some people in the Southlands we want to dive into deep. We'll be doing this again shortly. Don't you worry if we miss anything here. Before we get into some theories, because I'm dying to hear some thoughts, Rachel, on Isildur that you have. So we got I love Lauren Romo here with some great stuff. I'm looking forward to Nori and the Wizard storyline in season 2. Yeah. I gotta tell you, I'll say right here, right now, you mentioned some great stuff already, Alden, about the Harfoots. When that first started, and I love everyone in it. I keep shouting out Lenny Henry. I thought he was great. Rest in peace. It's Sadok. I was like, hey, yeah, okay. And then, the comet falls. Yeah, right. Maybe there's 2. Maybe the Dweller's like, oh, my bad. I meant the other one. Too late now. I was thinking, okay. But I like some swords. I like some horses and armor. That's kind of I want to go this way. I want to go this way. And then every time the Harfoots showed up, my heart started going back to them. And look, I love the hobbits, right? I'll quote. Rachel's been around me when I say share the load. Like I'll quote a hobbit. But the Harfoots just won me over. They, in some ways, the stuff with Durin and Elrond, warmth. Harfoots brought a lot of heart, perhaps the biggest amount of heart in the series for me. I don't know if I'm off base, Nicky. I'll start with you on the Harfoots, Stranger, wherever you want to go with that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think they're the ones who I think most brought home the sense of home, right? Like just this there's a comfort to them, and going the through line to the hobbits of their love of home and their comforts, and it's just they had that quality to them of, it's almost like to take it to a world we sort of might know. They feel like they're definitely the ones off social media, right? Like they have this purity of character where, like, when you talk to somebody who's
I almost yelled, oh, you mean Ewoks? I watched
yeah. No, it's like when you talk to somebody who's like detached from it, it's like, oh, this is nice. I like this. So yeah, I think there's just something really special about that. And I think with the Stranger, it was again just another great way in showing these very broad themes of the people who understand power the least being the best suited to guide him, and because he is I also would say Gandalf, but he's powerful. He's a powerful guy. We'll say that. And
one for Gandalf, you can't change now.
Oh, I'm not. I'm flipping a table if he's not Gandalf. But yeah, I think it's just such a brilliant fantasy theme. It's throughout so many great stories, and the Harfoots lived it in showing that what is it? A small man can cast a long shadow. And it's just a wonderful fantasy trope on power.
Yeah, we got the wonderful Molly Damon in chat here. Wish we got more of the Harfoots and got to know them a bit more before we move on from the pack, but I loved it all so much. Also, hi. No, you know what? That's a great point. And she says they're the normies. And I'll let you take us into even more Stranger Talk if you want to. But that was the thing. We got this emotional send off. Love what we got going. Yeah, I didn't quite, again, ugly cry as much as Alden, but I think I had the potential to. But yeah, I really can't wait until we get more. And yes, maybe we do get some of the characters move on and have more specifics, journeys, but adventures. Excuse me. That's a testament, because this was, again, I'm a huge fan of the Ewoks. Like, I was ready to overlook them, like the rest of this society in this Middle Earth, and I can't anymore. I love that.
Yeah, you were a hunter carrying your big moose, big moose antlers, just like I don't know, maybe a Harfoot, who cares? Yeah.
Romo
Mark me
says
down for
Mark
not
me down
Ken.
for not
Oh,
Ken.
okay, cool. Well, there's cash on the line. I just want you to know that. But you already said it, so you're in on the pool. I don't know how much cash yet. I am so. I don't know. I I don't know if it's this pandemic era or something. I am so ready for like sentimentality. Just like I was a big "This Is Us" guy. Anyone in the chat? "This Is Us." Like,
no, I get
people,
I get the reference, but no.
People love to. It was emotionally manipulative. Good. Emotionally manipulate me. I don't care. Isn't that what art's supposed to do? So when you set up something as pure as Nori Brandyfoot's arc, and what she's talking about and the way that those come back later, we talked about in our finale discussion, where the sparrows find their songs and all those things. She's not Elrond or Galadriel trying, having to be a character we know, but she's fulfilling that halfling protagonist thing, but still has to find new ground in it. Where Bilbo was one thing, Frodo was another thing, and they had a connection. She has to be a third thing, and I think they so beautifully succeeded at that. And that relationship with her and the stranger, now the Istar, like the way that they work together and the way that it all builds to what we were saying, like you can have great explorations, but you still have to find your way out of it and then come down on a choice. And that's why I love the very movie moment of he's the Istar, he is, and he says, "I'm good." Boom. That is the affirmation of everything that Nori's been saying and everything that he's been going through. It validates her, because I know early on there was well, if he's Sauron or if he's a Balrog or whatever, like that was one of my fears, is like, I cannot watch her be wrong. I can't watch that. I can't have that. I imagine if, to continue the Ewoks thing, big Ewoks guy, love him. Imagine if they had let the rebels out of the net and then Han just shot one. Like that would have been like, what? No, you are serving a greater theme.
I mean,
Luke
it would have been cool for like 2 seconds. I'd be like, that's
yeah, exactly. You can't do that. And so for her to be able to find this friendship that let her know, as Largo says, you're part of something bigger now, the letting go and everything. And in terms of the greater storyline, like Molly said, I would have loved to have known a lot more of them. I think the small roles like Malva are hilarious and they're great. And I really hope that either they pop up in a recurring capacity or maybe they start to appear in other storylines. It'd be great if like Arondir is walking around doing Arondir things and all of a sudden he bumps into Poppy. Like, who knows what they could do. But that whole build of Nori, I joked in the finale discussion, like she's media literate. Like she saw a staff and was like, he should use this. Yeah. Staff, that's awesome. And she got it. Like,
yeah,
just pure belief, just being rewarded is something we need. Yeah.
One of my favorite moments, and I'll toss it back to you, Rachel. When Nori is saying about mid-season, she's like, "I'm not special, but he is." That broke my heart, because who hasn't had that moment when you're like, "I'm probably nothing, but man, I'd like to help others, or I'd like to be involved in something bigger, but I know what at my level." It broke my heart, man. Even gives me those nerd chills now. It's such a powerful moment, and it pays off so well in the end there. Absolutely there. Just a powerful, you said it, a cinematic movie moment there, that send off, that whole scene there. Sorry, Rachel, I cut you off earlier.
Oh, no problem. To build on what Molly said, they're the normies. They say it close to the beginning, and then again in the finale, like Marigold says it in the beginning, and then Largo at the end. We're Harfoots. Elves guard their trees or their forests. Dwarves guard their mines. Men guards their fields of grain. Even the trees guard the roots beneath them. We're Harfoots. We stick to the path and we don't leave people behind. Like that is it. We are outside of all of this. And then at the end, for Nori's journey to also be a journey for the Harfoots, in the sense that staying on the path is not always the right way, that there is a bigger world out there, and to one of their goals should be to spread their outlook to that world. That's what Nori's going to do. He's going to bring, we don't fight in great battles, we don't dig for precious metals, we don't do any of these things, but we do stay true to each other, and we don't leave people behind. And that's an ethos. and that's an outlook. And so I'm glad Nori's going out. I still wish Poppy was going with her. I need my Poppy next season somehow, some way. But I love that. And I love also that the theme is the mingling of the races. I think I said in one of our earlier episodes, like at the beginning of this, everybody's in their own lane and everybody got prejudice against everybody else. And, you know, the elves to the low men, the Numenorians to the elves, the Southlanders to the elves, the dwarves and the elves. Like everybody's like, yep, we're here and we don't like any of these other people. Yeah. But there's a big bad. There's a greater evil shadow looming. And for us to defeat it, for us to do anything, we need to work together. And so now you have Elrond and Doran bringing the elves and the dwarves together. You have Arondir and the Southlanders learning to respect each other, and the Theo and the family. And oh my God, the family of Bronwyn, Arondir, Theo. Don't you dare do anything to that family unit. Don't you dare, show.
Love it.
I loved it. I loved it. And now the Harfoots too, because we've got one going off on a journey. I mean, none of the Harfoots can't be a part of any of the major events because they weren't in the histories. They didn't make the histories, but I think there's lots of ways that they can influence characters who are a part of those big events. Case in point, Nori with the wizard. So yeah. Beautiful. Well said. Taking that lesson forward. Yeah. You know, that whole, I keep singing to myself, you know, nobody walks alone and nobody goes off trail. Except for I say it like nobody walks alone and nobody goes off trail.
you and the chihuahuas behind you.
The good stuff there. And as far as the stranger, James with another great comment. I'm very intrigued by what we're getting with the stranger. I can only imagine that any women's cats are strict as the wizard, but we've only gotten a small taste of the character. Yeah. As we start to maybe look to wrap up, and we haven't talked about Bronwyn and Arondir yet, so that's why we're not done talking about Rings of Power on this channel at
Part
all.
2.
Yeah, Part 2. We're going to keep going all the way up to Season 2 as this Casterly Talk, mostly a Westeros and Essos podcast. We expand our horizons here. The Stranger, it was fun. I like that kind of stuff. I don't need everything to be a mystery box or this and that, but the moment he hits, it's played that way. I like the speculation. When speculation dominates, and takes your expectations away that you don't pull yourself back from, that's where I think it's a problem. The Force Center speculate responsibly phrase we've had for years. But it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. We got the deep themes. We got the nerd chill moments. And also, hey, who is that guy? And the reveal, all signs perhaps pointing to Gandalf. I'll start with you, Rachel, because we've had a lot of theories, the Bombadil of it all, the Balrog of it all. There was some thought of like, what can they move on the timeline in the Tolkien world? What legally can they move if it is Gandalf? Correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel. That's a bit of a moving a piece along the board. Yeah.
He's not supposed to be showing up in Middle Earth until the Third Age. This is somewhere in the Second Age. They're taking two ends of the events that happen at two ends of the Second Age and bringing them a whole lot closer together than they're supposed to be. Playing fast and loose with some of the timetable, but the order of the events they've been maintaining. So that would be a big out of order event to do. And like I said last week, I can't say one way or the other if it's a good thing because I don't know where it leads. And I don't, if there is a way to bring it back around, like the way that they brought Mithril back around to the Elven Rings, they really went off book for a while with, a whole brand new myth. And for a lot of hardcore fans, the idea of a Silmaril being involved in this way was very anti the story that they knew. But one of the Elven Rings was made out of Mithril, and the power that they're saying Mithril has is the power that gets imbued in the Elven Rings to preserve the Elven kingdoms through the Third Age. So they brought it back, and so with whether this is Gandalf or a different wizard, or it's a version of Gandalf, Olorin, which is his true form as a Maya. If this is one version of him, and then another one comes, as Alden pitched last week, in the Third Age during the correct time, all are plausible. And like you said, I'm happy to speculate and talk about it, but whatever it ends up being, If it's way off anything that I said, I'm the one who said he could be a Balrog, guys. Like, I'm fine if I'm wrong.
Which at the time,
Why not? Why
I
not?
just love that. Nikki, didn't you say like blame Brian Cogman for everything?
Yeah,
it's
I
like
totally blame
TV. Like,
Cogman.
yeah, like the whole like, okay, we gave you the Sauron answer, but have fun with this nose line for the next year. Like, it's like we've given you that, and I am an Aloran the Blue truther. You know, where like
you get like text like this long from Alden. Look at this. Look at this.
I literally I was like screenshots. I was like, well, apparently before Tolkien died, he revisited the blue, and they could have been early, and like just like all this stuff that I have no right to talk about. I'm just so brand new. But the idea of that's always been something that's interested me. Like, Gandalf is the most qualified, the most heroic, the most in touch with the people. And he was also the one that did not want to come because he was directly afraid of this guy, Sauron. Is this show the reason why Aloran in Valinor was like, nah, I'm good. I'm not going. No, you have fun fighting him, Saruman and Radagast, to catch you later. And then the gods being like, you should probably go. Is this why? I love all that. I love that it's setting us up to see a land that, Rachel, to my knowledge, is extremely undefined. We don't know what it looks like, who's there. Very vague. Maybe I joked like we're gonna get there and it's like we make fireworks, and then he'll be like, "Oh hell yeah, I love these. I'm gonna make these. I'm gonna carry them around." But yeah, it just the way that it all sort of wrapped up, and his performance was beautiful, and the way that he does that thing that some roles allow you to do, which is play three shades, like the way that he was the stranger, and then he's becoming himself, but he's afraid, and then when he stands up. Yeah. Suddenly it's like, well, the voice is clear. There's a balance, there's a presence, and whatever that's going to be, it's really exciting. It's extremely exciting.
It's like he and Charlie Vickers got to play almost two different characters.
In the and both of them hired and cast on
without knowing
pieces of knowledge. This, but then later we tell you. And according to Daniel Wayman, I think we said in the finale episode, he still doesn't know, and that could be PR stuff, and that's fine too. But yeah.
Oh, love it.
Yes,
love
Molly, the music. I've been listening to the soundtrack, and again, when you're going through the on a rewatch and you're hearing all the themes, you hear them sooner now because you recognize them, and so like the way that they're woven together when people start to cross paths and everything else. But yeah,
Sailing into the
I've
dawn.
been a Beer McCreary fan since Battlestar Galactica, and I really think that he has just done incredible. Building on the foundation of Howard Shore, but really making it his own too.
Love that. Molly adds in chat. I remember being in high school listening to all the Jackson movie soundtracks, and my tiny mind blown. This show fits so well. First of all, I was 71 when movies came out. So
I was 2.
Oh, F you. We're almost done here. We're leaving a lot on the table. I understand that. So if anyone's listening later, listening to podcasts, stop screaming at us. We'll get to it. But before we get out of here, theories, thoughts, anything like that. Rachel, we are going to start with you because before we even go into air here, you're like, I have Isildur thoughts. Now, what are these thoughts?
All right. You got to hear me out, and I'm going to spoil another television show. Okay. This is not Tolkien or anything. What's
the name of the show so we can give? Is it This Is Us? They all
died. No, sorry, they all know that.
It was the crockpot.
Shut up.
Speaking of already mentioned Battlestar Galactica, did anybody watch Caprica?
No.
Ooh,
yes, I did.
Did you see where I'm going with this?
But no, you have to refresh me because I'm literally trying to remember. Did I finish it? And I didn't.
All right. Well, it was a one season and done. It did not do well.
Yeah.
But it is a prequel. And at the beginning of Caprica, you meet Esai Morales plays an Adama, and he has a young boy named Bill. And Edward James Olmos is William Adama in Battlestar Galactica. So you assume that this kid is going to be the Adama we know. Sorry for spoilers. Nope, he dies. And the patriarch Adama, I can't remember his first name, has another son and names him William as well in honor of the first one who died. And that is the Adama. So, because the lifespans of Numenorians, dwarves, they're not immortal, but we could go like it doesn't have to be like in 10 years the last alliance has to happen because Elendil is whatever age he is. They can be spread out. So he could, in theory, remarry, have another son, and name him Isildur in honor of the one that he lost, and that is the one we know. It's out there. I know it is, but like just to play on the expectations, because when Isildur was buried in the fire, like we all said, no, he can't. We can't. It's Isildur. He has to cut the ring from the finger. Like, no.
To Isildur theory. Rachel. Oh, that's so interesting. Because the whole time, my whole thing has been like way less of like an intricate theory and more like just like, wouldn't it be cool if like he bumps into Halbrand on the road and once again this guy's hanging out with somebody that will help bring about his downfall? But that, especially because they've made it a point that everyone close to him calls him Isil.
Yeah, Beric is the other, the Brago with Aragorn. Like Beric finds a terribly wounded Isildur somewhere and leads him to somewhere he can get met. That is more likely.
I've been in a huge any animal bonding just like breaks me because of how much my dog has been there for me over the past couple of years and like per year. And I mean, I cried in Peacemaker when John Cena hugged an eagle. And I was, so when Elendil let that horse go, that broke me. But that would be something. I mean, there's Anarion is still on the table, and where does he factor in? And
hey, I love a wild theory. All right, let's. We can't go anymore.
We'll come back. I know.
2 more hours.
I want to thank everyone who's been listening. I want to especially thank anyone who you gave a super chat tonight. It's always not needed, but definitely appreciated. We're going to come back. We also got the finale of House of the Dragon to discuss this week and dive into that show. And we're not done discussing this world. And the reason being, I put on the Hobbit the other day, part one. I did, and I just had it on, right? And I've had a weird relationship with those films. They didn't strike me as much in the theater, which is not unusual for a lot of folks. And I kind of revisited them a couple years ago with my fiance Grace, who's a big Tolkien fan, and I was like, you know what, I'm kind of looking at these differently. I had a different experience, and they're not legally connected. But the new context to a lot of things, just the little expansion of the world is pulling me in. So we're going to be discussing those films, the Lord of the Rings films, along the way here. So it's going to be fun. But and wrap up here on looking towards season 2. Look at any theories, anything you want to get out here in your final statement.
Final statement, and again, we will do parts 3, 2, 3, 4, however many it takes. There are characters that are in play verbally that have not yet been in play physically or have been cast, like Celeborn. I know that Nikki and I will be doing an alcohol-ridden celebration stream if Glorfindel is cast. We'll do a whole stream, just a Glorfindel hype party. So there's a lot of that where it's like, look at how much we've given you in 8 episodes, and we haven't even gotten started. Which, like, the showrunners have even said, like, yeah, season 2 is going to be the show you thought you were going to get. That was prologue. Like, they didn't say that, but so in terms of that, like, how much more of those rewarding moments, I think this cast is so phenomenal that to see who else they add, now I have implicit trust. So I cannot wait to see how this expands, and we'll be talking about it for quite a while.
Love that there. Nikki, final thoughts from you. It's been fun having you here. You're very insightful, Cat, on all this stuff too. So and thank you for being the ice to Alden's fire sometimes.
There you go. I think I got to stick to my own personal brand and mention Narsil Watch again. I think obviously they didn't say it, but we saw it. And man, when that thing gets in Elendil's hands, I'm gonna scream. So I'm so excited for more of Numenor and more of how things like that eventually make their way over to cutting some dudes' fingers off. And then I think as far as theories, I just have to like do a firm plant on Gandalf. Like they can't. I will turn into the emoji of the huffing thing. If they gave us those little winky nods at all that Gandalf dialogue, and then they don't
And it not be
make him Gandalf, I'll be a little miffed. But yeah,
you're gonna get in your car, you're gonna record a video.
Oh yeah, going after everyone. Bezos will hear from me. But yeah, I think Narsil is such a dear object to me, and I can't wait to see it again and see it in action in Lloyd Owen's hands.
Absolutely, yeah, and Numenor. We hadn't even discussed Numenor much tonight. More on that as we look at this series, look at season 1, and look ahead. It's going to be a lot of fun. Rachel, I'll give a final thought to you. Other than I'll say this right now, man, it's been a lot of fun to dive in this world. This show has pulled me in more to this world that I've loved for decades now myself, and that's part of the joy I'm experiencing week to week. It was such a fun, warm show to watch, and I like dark shows. I like somber shows. Andor, House of the Dragon, somber. Rings of Power, warm, optimistic, like you said earlier, Alden, with some shades of Dark Throne in there, absolutely. So final thoughts here in this episode, Rachel, to you, looking back and maybe looking ahead.
Yeah, nope, I unabashedly loved this show. And as a huge Tolkien nerd, lorehead, whatever you want to call it, for me, I believed I was in Middle-earth, and I believed I was with these characters, and these actors just killed it. And I think that the finale was really well done in terms of giving us some answers, but also leaving a lot of stuff on the table. Like as we said, Numenor, Pharazôn's going to get a lot more active. I'll be curious what they're trying to do with Kemen and Eärien. We know that she probably looked at the Palantir, and that's the last we saw of her.
Yeah.
And Miriel coming back and being very adamant about wanting to go back to Middle-earth. She has a new purpose. All of that's going to play out in a really, I think, great, interesting, complicated but fun way. I don't know, the Battle of the Durins. Like it feels like it's not just going to be Durin the Third passes and Durin the Fourth takes the crown. Like I feel like there is like I said, Deesa's last speech gave big Lady Macbeth vibes. Like this is your kingdom. This is our kingdom. That is our mithril. We are all of that. So I feel like there's probably something going to come to a head there, and I'm really excited to see where that goes. And just give me more Elrond.
More Elrond. Decent kind of a show stealer for me too at times. So love all the stuff you're saying there. All right, folks, we are out of here. This is Casterly Talk. You can find us on Facebook. You can like us on you can like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. I don't even know how social media works anymore because I've pulled back so far from it. It's all stuff there. It's been a lot of fun hanging out with all of you in the live chat tonight, on the podcast later. Tell your friends about this show. Come here for the deep dives, thoughts, the themes, and occasionally deep questions as well. But we love to celebrate this world because otherwise, why would we stick around? Rachel, I know you don't have 12 podcasts to promote, but where can they find you?
Just Twitter and Instagram at Rachel Cushing Levine, all one word.
There you go. Nikki, always fun to have you here. Won't be the last. Maybe one time we'll get a bite to eat here locally as well, and we'll talk about our concerns about Alden's future. But where can they find you and all the shows you work on?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me at Naquicious. It's NAQUICIOUS on Twitter. Imperial Senate Podcast for Star Wars Talk. Rewatch Between Worlds on Alden's Octo Radio for more specific Star Wars Rebels, Star Wars Talk. And then the One and Done Film Club, which I also do with Alden and our friend Reed, where we just watch a movie and talk about it. It's more complicated, or not complicated, more interesting than just that. But it's a great time. So check it out at One, the letter N, Done Show.
Yeah. Alden, take it from there. Take it from there. Take the baton. Tell them where to find all of your stuff.
Yeah, you can find me personally on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, I guess, at that Alden Diaz, THATALDENDIAZ, Octa Radio Star Wars Podcast, which Nicky already mentioned. We do a Rebels rewatch there called A Rewatch Between Worlds. It's also the interview shows. Right now we're in Andor season, but it really is, focused on one-on-one interviews with people in the Star Wars world and Star Wars worlds adjacent. And then also writing around the internet, doing different things. And I was about to plug Casterly Talk, even though here we are. So that tells you how much we get into sort of like the pre-written ramble there at the end. But yeah, while you're here, definitely like, subscribe, and buckle up, because House of the Dragon and Rings of Power are going to be in their off season. But there is no off season for us.
There is no off season. You can follow me at Ken Napzok. Hey, want to see some comedy? Mark Ellis and I will be in Seattle on October. This is October now, October 28th, up at the Crocodile Great Rock Club up in Seattle. Go to my website for ticket information. Thanks to all who came out to La Jolla last weekend. We'll see you soon here on Casterly Talk.